So this morning I want to talk about learning by letting go. And last Saturday, if you were here, you'll recall we talked about the quiet power of release. And today I want to dig deeper into release, specifically the letting go piece of that, because it seemed to me there was more that needed to be said about the quiet power of release. And letting go is often spoken of in spiritual traditions, including Buddhism, as something lofty or mystical, but it really isn't. It's deeply practical, and we come at it in practical Dharma as a very pragmatic skill, one that can really transform the texture, the tone of our daily lives. And as we talked about last week, when we talked about release, in ordinary life, we constantly meet situations that require us to release our preferences, release our plans, release our sense of how things should be. And so learning to let go with clarity and with steadfastness is just not a minor footnote in Buddhist practice. It is a central teaching. It is that fundamental. And importantly, it's not about deprivation. It's not about letting go and depriving ourselves, but it's about discovering a more spacious, a more easeful way to meet the realities of our lives. In everyday situations, we do this all the time. We're just not always conscious of it. Letting go happens naturally. The weather changes and so we change our plans. A child gets sick and our personal plans dissolve. We have to adjust. A friend needs help and we cut off the TV show we're watching to go help our friend, and on and on and on. We let go all the time. And because life continually asks us to adapt, and we do it. It's just sort of what we do. Yet often we also, in other instances, we resist doing it. We resist these small moments of letting go. We tighten around what we wanted or expected. We cling to what we wanted, even when the situation itself has changed. This tightening, this clinging is really a significant source of that low grade suffering, that low grade stress that we talked about last week. The event has already happened, but it is our refusal to release our grip on what has happened that creates the tension. Okay. So, the train has already left the station. We're just standing there on the platform, gripping tightly to wishing that it hadn't left. Our practice invites us not only to let go of specific desires, specific opinions when circumstances shift, but as I want to dig into today, to examine the deeper habit of clinging itself. And I'm going to hopefully make that distinction because this becomes far more challenging. It asks us to notice how we build this sense of who we are, this sense of self, this identity around our preferences, around our roles, around our ideas, around our convictions. Okay, it asks us to just notice how we build what we think is a permanent self around all of these preferences. And it requires us to see how quickly we say, this is who I am, or this is how things must be, or this is how I see the world, and the world must be that way. And if not, it's wrong, it's bad. Freedom in Buddhism means releasing not just this outdated, fixed image, self image, or an unhelpful belief, but the very compulsion that we have to cling to any fixed identity at all. It is a process, as I often use this metaphor, of relaxing the hand that holds so tightly so that the holding itself softens. For many of us, letting go carries a sense of mistrust. It can feel like giving up, we're becoming passive, we're throwing in the towel, we're allowing others to control us. And without the wisdom piece, it is possible that we let go of the wrong things. For example, giving up healthy habits because they're inconvenient or we don't have time for them. Rather than working with the clinging that makes us rigid around those habits, or abandoning an aspiration because we feel discomfort. These are not examples of wise letting go. Those are forms of avoidance. Buddhist practice, and this is where it gets a little nuanced, clarifies this by distinguishing between letting go of something, letting go of an object or an idea, and versus letting go of the grasping to that thing. And I'll try to clarify that in a moment. So that we're going to distinguish between letting go of something, an idea, an object, or whatever relationship, and letting go of the grasping itself to that thing. Okay, a very important but subtle distinction. Because sometimes, yes, it's appropriate to give up the object itself. Someone struggling with alcohol, abuse needs to relinquish alcohol entirely. Not the idea of the alcohol, but picking up those drinks. But when we cling, but when clinging is to something neutral, like a memory or something beneficial, like caring for a family member, it's the tight grip that needs to be released, not the activity or the object itself. Okay. So, for instance, if we're caring for a family member that's in need, we don't want to give that up. But if we rigidly hold on to how we should do it and how often we should do it and how well we should do it, then we're not giving up the object of our clinging. We're loosening the clinging to that object. Okay, and specific situations can teach us about this distinction once we begin to really see it. Okay, so for instance, if I'm holding on to the past with resentment, with grief, with nostalgia, the past is not the problem. The past can't be changed. As I said, the train has left the station. But when I cling to that past, when I fixate on selective pieces of my past and replay them endlessly, then regret starts to consume me. The past is not the problem. As I said, the train has left the station. It's clinging to the past. It's the clinging that's the problem. When I loosen the grip on the past, it becomes a teacher rather than a trap. We learn from what happened instead, rather than clinging tightly to I shouldn't have, I was terrible, what's wrong with me? I learn from it, I find clarity, I choose wisely in the present, and then I let it go. It's still there, but I'm not holding on to it. Letting go is easier when we understand the shortcomings of what we're holding on to in those instances. Seeing clearly that if I hold on to arrogance, it pushes people away. It makes humility so much more appealing. Recognizing that money can't buy connection, purpose, or meaning or peace in our lives helps me loosen my fixation on money. Money is not the problem, but if I'm clinging to it so tightly because I think it's going to bring me happiness, therein lies the problem. Understanding the nature of the object that we're clinging to can expose why clinging to it causes stress. Sometimes it's the grasping itself, as I've just said, not the object that we need to look at. Grasping is tightness. It is tightness. It hurts. It is stressful. It is exhausting. It is a tremendous source of suffering. And it obscures our perceptions. It takes over. It makes us reactive because I'm protecting the thing or the idea or the notion that I'm clinging to. When this grasping takes over like this, we lose contact with our own sense of balance and well-being. It just consumes us. We get all entangled in fear and anger and restlessness and suffering. But when we investigate the grasping directly, not necessarily, we look at the object first. Yes, that may need to go, the object. But suppose it's not, the object's not the problem. We investigate the grasping itself. We feel the tension in the body. We notice the repetitive stories we tell ourselves about it again and again. And there it becomes clear that the grip itself is the immediate source of suffering, not the thing, not the story we are squeezing. Now, the practical value here is when we do this investigation, it helps us with our discernment. When the object of attachment is harmful itself, like the alcohol I used, described, we let go of the object. We stop drinking, or we stop overeating, or we stop overspending when the object is the problem. But when the object is beneficial, like helping someone out, we we release only the grasping. This is the takeaway. We don't stop helping them, but we stop clinging to some standard of how that should look, how that should be, that is just rigid and doesn't give us any kind of freedom to move in there with that grasping, even with a beneficial object. This is a critical, important distinction, I would argue, in our path. It allows what is wholesome or helpful to remain in place, like helping my friend, like caring for a neighbor with genuine kindness, rather than grasping to some need for approval from helping my neighbor. I'm doing it from my heart, not from some ego-based need for approval. And I hope you can feel the difference in my motivation there. What's driving this? We need to look at that. Taking care of my health can be done with wisdom, can make good choices, or anxiety about control. I have to do so many steps every week. I have to eat this food every week. I can't deviate from this. I'm rigidly holding on to this agenda. Or enjoying nature can be a moment of freedom and awe, or it can be overshadowed if I'm clinging to a fear that, oh, it's going to end, it's all bad, it's terrible. It's the activity is the same, which is in putting myself in nature. But what am I clinging to there? The presence or absence of clinging in those situations makes all the difference. Now, one more distinction, not to make the picture any cloudier, but one more distinction. The Buddhist teachings emphasize that letting go has two complementary sides. Okay. Two complementary sides. One is letting go of something, as I said, loosening our grip. The other is letting go into something where we lean into it, we trust it, we relax into it, we settle into what is wholesome. Okay. Now these work together. It's like jumping off a diving board is the first thing. That's the loosening the grip. Entering the water is embracing something which is wholesome. So for instance, letting go of irritation allows me to enter into calmness. Letting go of the ego's need to be right allows me to settle into a more peaceful state of mind. Letting go of fear allows me to lean into or move into a feeling of safety or openness. The second side is important because if we resist letting go simply because we don't know what will replace what we're releasing, if we don't know about what's in the water, then we're going to resist letting go and leaning into that calmness, leaning into that joy. If we believe that letting go means falling into the unknown, falling into the void, we cling tighter. We stay up on the diving board. We look at the water. We don't move. We become paralyzed. But when we see that letting go and go ahead and jumping leads into groundedness, clarity, warmth, then the process becomes less frightening. It's that uncertainty thing that hangs us up. Because then we feel like something, when we let go there, is gained and not lost. From this perspective, the Buddhist notion of renunciation, or releasing unhelpful attachments, becomes more understandable. You think about it in those terms. Rather than deprivation, it's like stepping out of a cramped, stuffy, airless room into the open air. We can breathe. Even if that room was familiar, even it was filled with people we care about, the spaciousness of stepping out of that clinging room feels liberating. Renunciation in this sense, in the Buddhist sense, means walking out of the confinement created by our own grasping. And letting go, in this context, of something beneficial, into something beneficial, not of, into, is less about effort and more about allowing. Remember, we talked about allowing last month. Accepting and allowing. Letting go into something beneficial, even if there's uncertainty, is about allowing. Just as a person who knows how to swim can float by trusting the water beneath them, if we cultivate compassion, for example, we can rest in empathy when we let go. Letting go of fear can lead naturally into calm when we know how to recognize what calmness feels like within us. We can trust it. When letting go deepens, each moment begins to relieve itself as enough. We don't need more. We discover there's a simple abundance which is already there, which we already have. And that rush headlong into the next task, the next goal, the next shiny object eases. The sense that we need to become someone or achieve something else in order to be whole softens. And when that happens, there's a clarity. The present moment feels more intimate. It feels more real. It feels more breathable. It feels more spacious because we're not chasing something way beyond the horizon. We are living in what is unfolding right in front of us. And then over time with this practice, as we let go, as we release and trust in good things, we let go of clinging to even the good things. A wider range of wholesome states begins to appear: calmness, loving kindness, equanimity, clarity, groundedness, places where we can rest when we release unhelpful attachments. Those places are there. We obscure them by clinging, clinging, clinging. Even eventually, this sense of I or me can become softer. The peace becomes simple and with clarity. It's not a mystical experience. It's not a transit. It's right there. It is a practical freeing from the tension of constantly trying to construct and defend a self, constantly trying to keep that mask in place. But in the end, letting go is not about loss. It's about making space. Space for clarity, space for kindness, wisdom, and ease. When I don't have to worry about the mask, those things just bubble to the surface. There's a greater ease there. It's not about meeting life with clenched hands. I use this metaphor often. You hear me use it often. It's about with open hands. And what we find is that with that openness, a more grounded and peaceful way of living becomes possible. Moment by moment, we experience this birthright, which is the freedom that the Buddha promised us. So those are some thoughts this morning on learning by letting go.